For those of you with motion sickness issues or epilepsy, I would take heed and warning. There are flashing lights and very bright lights and very high-speed motion in this video. Alrighty tighty folks, this is the second version of what I'd promised you guys previously, road trip video, where because I'm cheap and or lazy, I don't tend to get hotels when I go on road trips. I pack the car up most of the time when I go on like a regular road trip. It's just a road trip, not somewhere I'm going to stay for a while, but I'm going for a week or so. I pack the car up such that I can lay the seat back and take a nap in it, and I keep a blanket handy in case it's chilly, etc., etc. This wasn't one of those. I was intentionally going down to Arizona to stay for a few weeks, what ended up actually turning into 6 months, and so I needed to take quite a bit more stuff with me than I normally would have on a regular road trip. Most road trips, I won't even bother taking the desktop because it's just large and takes up so much room in the car, and even without seats other than the driver's seat, it's a bit of a squeeze. And I also took a few other things, toys and fun items that to show my buddy in Arizona that we never actually even went out and played with, which is sad, I guess. That's fine. It's the next time I go down, I'll take him with me then, and we'll do it then. You'll notice this is about the time where the sun's getting low enough that it goes through the mesquite bushes and starts making those flashing lights I was talking about. So if you have photosensitivities, I'd recommend either skipping. I'll place a marker later on in the video where it's a lot less intense, because the morning time is a little bit some of this too. So I'll place a marker. It's about halfway through the trip, which is roughly 10 hours or so. I'll place a marker down there so you guys can just skip ahead to it if you want to do that. I don't really like interstates, primarily because there's people on them, and cars being heavy machinery and people being untrained. I don't want to die at somebody else's hand because they simply cannot be bothered to understand how to operate their piece of heavy machinery correctly. So I take back roads. Also, back roads are more interesting. You see more cool things on back roads than you ever will on any interstate. The point of an interstate is to get you somewhere quickly without a whole lot of muss or fuss. All these back roads were old cattle trails that they expanded, or ranch trails, which most of the ranch trails were cattle trails that they expanded, so ranch trails that they expanded from cattle trails they expanded, etc., etc. And a lot of these little roads, like Route 66, is technically a little road. It was before interstates and previously how you got across the country, and there's a whole bunch of just cool little things across Route 66. Bunch of it shut down now because interstates diverted all the traffic because people just want to go places, and a lot of times these days people take airplanes when they go somewhere. The amount of stuff that I take with me on road trips, even regular road trips, is still way more than an airplane would allow me to take. I'd end up paying for 2 or 3 tickets by the time I got done taking all the stuff that I needed to take. So I just drive. The last I measured, I was getting about 68 miles to the gallon on a flat with no wind. Granted, driving into the wind, driving up a hill, turning the AC on whenever I decide to put it back in the car, all of that stuff's going to kind of ruin your fuel mileage. But even ruining amazing fuel mileage in something like a Honda Civic, a Geo Metro, a Smart 2.4, what have you, it's still better fuel mileage than a Tahoe unloaded. It's still better fuel mileage than a Hummer unloaded. So we don't really care all that much. This first section, that is, I guess, the first long section, you'll notice, if you look really, really carefully, is dirt. By the time I got done with the trip, I arrived back home Wednesday the 22nd at around 1400. There's something wrong in the steering rack in the Civic now. Every time you try to turn, it clunks. If you saw my stream yesterday the 27th, you will have seen a little bit of that where I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. I took the camera over there and stuck it underneath the dash, and we looked at the input shaft to the steering rack that is currently installed in the Civic, and it moves. It should not move. That tells me the input shaft bearing has failed, which, not a huge deal. I'll get a rebuild kit, which is $30 or $40, I think. And yeah, thought I felt it funny right there, exactly. But late night, dark, I'm trying to get down the road. If it's not yanking the wheels off the car, I really don't care. There's another time where I stopped because I thought I felt the funny again, and didn't see anything immediate. I checked that the wheels were still attached, and I just continued about my business, so that was fine. But rebuilding steering racks, not actually all that hard, as it turns out. I don't remember. Did I make a video about that? I don't even remember. I don't think I think I did the rack before I started the channel. So maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll make a video of rebuilding that steering rack and showing you guys that bearing, because I can only imagine what that thing looks like. I'm hoping it's not the input shaft is damaged, because that is a possibility also. But it does it regardless of steering wheel position, it seems. So my knee-jerk reaction is bearing, not shaft. It could also be something funny in the valve body, because the way the valve actuator sits on the shaft, there is play, there has to be play, and it might have gotten damaged driving down the dirt road. I hit pretty heavy washboard a couple of times, and being twilight and that kind of hard to see time, I didn't see it until I felt it. I didn't see it before I felt it, I guess, and I ended up hitting the washboard 40-50 miles an hour, because most of the rest of the road was fairly well maintained. There were a few sections in between ranches, I suspect, that were less maintained because they were probably less traveled, which makes perfect sense. You also you maintain a road long enough out in the countryside, you're not bringing material in generally to maintain these roads, so you're cutting them down when you do it, and when you take the blade over top of the dirt, if you're in a rocky area, you end up, the blade just kind of skips over the rocks until the rocks are exposed enough that they begin coming out of the ground. So then you get just a bunch of big rocks sticking out of the ground in the middle of the road because you just can't deal with them yet. Now, during this video, there will be 3 times that I circle this particular car. And I don't know what was wrong. I don't know if they were terrified, if they had night driving problems. I genuinely have no idea what was going on inside that car. It was dark. You're not even going to see inside even if you wanted to. I didn't even bother trying. All I do know is that for about 2 hours, this person was on about the same route as I was, and right here, they passed me. Another time I stopped for fuel, they passed me, and then I think I had a bio brake necessity, so they passed me again there. 3 times I dealt with this car. That was the first one. They would be driving on a flat, not an uphill, not a downhill, driving on a flat, and constantly hitting their brakes. I don't know if they were double footing it and had a very sensitive brake light switch or what, but they could not maintain a speed either. They would do 10 over and then they would do 15 under. So clearly something was wrong. This is the kind of thing you should not be doing. It's, if you're afraid of it, honestly, get out of it, because as densities on the roadways continue to increase, it becomes ever more important to pay attention to safety, to how you operate your vehicle. You can't be speeding up and slowing down and speeding up and slowing down and speeding up and slowing down constantly. You need to maintain as much of a regular speed as you can. You can go under the speed limit, that's fine. If the speed limit's posted 65, you can do 60. You can do 55 reasonably without expecting that anybody's going to try to murder you in the middle of it. Anything less than that, there is a specification for interstates that I'm not sure if all states have adopted similar specifications or legislation or regulations or ordinances, whatever you want to call them. But there is a specification for minimum speed on interstates. I would imagine most states also have that for state roads and things. At some point, you need to turn your hazards on, right? Not flashers, not blinkers, they're hazards. Because the whole purpose of the light is to indicate to others that you are potentially hazardous to them. Or to yourself even. Sometimes you just need to transport a vehicle somewhere and it's got a problem. It's drivable, but you don't know exactly if it will fail and leave you stranded or something like that, and you don't have a phone to call a tow truck, you don't have insurance that covers a tow truck, and you can't afford a tow truck, you don't have a friend with a trailer. It's a number of situations that you can imagine that you have to transport a vehicle, you have to drive it on a road, you try to take the back roads, and it's potentially hazardous, right? So you try to do what you can to get it where you need to go without hurting yourself or other people. Perfectly acceptable. Absolutely perfectly acceptable. But you need to turn your hazards on if you are a hazardous vehicle. That's what they are for. That is their purpose. You'll also notice that we just passed the second time encountering that person, and that for some reason the front camera, OBS just stopped recording the front camera for what had to have been 20 minutes going back through the footage. So all we get for a good couple of minutes is the rear camera view. You'll also notice some people don't understand what safe following distance is, which is part of the reason why I wanted to film this in the first place. The camera lenses are too wide angle, so they don't really give you a clear indication of true distance. So what I'm going to have to do, you can see that in this kind of warp field image as I'm driving through town there. But you can see that it's not really clear how far away things are from the vehicle. What I'm going to do in another video soon is I'm going to put the cameras back in the car the same way, and I'm going to put markers on the road and measure, and then we'll do a little video analysis of distances at various speeds, what is safe, what is unsafe. One of the biggest reasons I wanted to start this YouTube channel in the first place is talking about safety on the roads, automotive safety, right? Because again, it is heavy machinery. These things weigh tons, plural, tons, multiple thousands of pounds. Right? Some of them weigh 2.5, 3 tons. They're very heavy. When they're traveling, even 30 miles an hour, they are extremely dangerous. They can kill people. Look at the news sometime where people do that to other people intentionally. They're dangerous, okay? You need to understand that. You also need to understand that your vehicle is not what you measure everything on the road off of. If you're driving a Tahoe and you're following too closely behind a Camry or a Civic or a Smart, I guarantee you that tiny little car that weighs nothing can stop a heck of a lot faster than you can in that big old truck. So the heavier your vehicle, the further back you need to follow to ensure that you are not going to injure other people if they have to perform an emergency stop, because you don't know what's in front of them. You also don't know who they are or what they see with their eyeballs. Maybe they took some shrooms, maybe they're just tripping and they see a giant elephant in the road. You don't know, and that's the whole point. And one of the major factors for me starting this channel was that I wanted to start recording driving around and just talking about, this is what you do not do, this is what you do. Do. You can see in this section, it's actually a lot easier to see it here at night than during the day, because it's like, you know, a neon Tron fest going on with all the lights. You can see how far behind these trucks I changed lanes to begin passing them. And are they heavier than me? Very probably. Can I guarantee that? Not at all. They could be empty. An empty truck can stop quite quickly, actually, a lot of times. Also, an empty truck, well, a full truck can too. If a truck hits its brakes and the trailer locks up completely, locks up all 8 wheels, that trailer could go sideways and in front of the truck, even on a dry road. It happens. It's possible. You don't know. If an airline brakes on the truck while he's driving down the road, it happens. It's possible. You simply don't know unless you have inspected every single vehicle in the country yourself, and you have met every single person that owns a driver's license yourself. You cannot possibly know what is going to happen. So, you change lanes earlier. You keep a safe following distance. Safe following distance, funnily enough, people don't know this apparently, also applies for the distance when you get back in front of a vehicle you have recently passed. It is your duty as the person passing to ensure that you enter the lane, the right lane, again, maintaining a safe distance. That is your duty, not the person you just passed. The person you just passed has the right-of-way in that lane, and that right-of-way extends out from their vehicle some distance based on the rate of travel. So most states have a time rule or ordinance, law, legislation, whatever you want to say, where following distance is considered to be 2 to 3 seconds for most states. I have seen, I don't remember who it was, I saw a state one time that did 10 to 15 miles an hour per car length, and I like that a little bit better, but people don't always have good depth perception, so how do you judge that really? The better measurement technique for just your average person is going to be the time rule, which is 2 to 3 seconds. So you take the back bumper of the vehicle in front of you. When it passes some landmark, you begin counting. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. If you hit 3, 1,000, okay, or you say it the other way around, 1,001, 1,002, or Mississippi's. however many Mississippis you use, whatever method you use to try to keep time. Even a stopwatch. If you use a stopwatch would be better because younger people count faster than older people, on average. There's been a couple of studies done on it. It's quite interesting, actually. As your brain gets older and starts to slow down processing, so does your measurement of time, which is a whole other video we could make just talking about that. That's fun to me. But if you are less than 2 seconds from somebody's rear end, you are making a conscious decision to potentially cause them harm. I don't care what anybody says. You can argue it all you want. It is a conscious decision that you're making to be close to that other vehicle. You are thinking to yourself, this is acceptable, this is right, this is good, and those streetlights are terrible. I really hope people heeded the photosensitivity warning. Wow. Okay, we're done with that. Back to the rant, I suppose. Staying in your own lane, using turn signals, yielding the right-of-way, maintaining a safe following distance. These are conscious decisions that you have to make while you're operating a vehicle. If you're driving and you're not making conscious decisions, you're not driving deliberately, you should not be operating the machine. Because again, heavy machinery. It can kill people. If I always go back to the Tahoe versus Camry argument. If a Tahoe traveling 80 miles an hour clips a Toyota Camry and the rear end just clips them, there is a very high probability the energy transfer between the Tahoe and the Camry will be so great that the Camry will be driven off the road, potentially roll, flip, crush the cabin, injure, or end the operator of the Camry, while the Tahoe barely feels it. And that's because of plain inertia. The Tahoe has far more inertia. So energy transfer, the energy subtracted from the Tahoe is less proportionally than the energy implanted to the Camry. Proportionally. Because the Camry has less inertia. Right? Everything is boiled down to basic physics that every one of us should have learned at the very least in high school. If you didn't complete high school, then you probably didn't learn this, and now's your time to start, I guess. Changing gears a little bit after ranting for 15 minutes. It was about this point, actually. I remember this section of the road. It was about, the street lamps. But it was about this point where I realized that while my headlights on the Civic are infinitely better than they used to be, when I got this car, you couldn't see 15 feet in front of you. It was dangerous, it was terrifying, and I had to change something about it. So I made some modifications. We put some LEDs in. I made sure that they were adjusted correctly, because that is what you do when you change headlights. Every time you change headlights. Made sure they were adjusted correctly so that I wasn't blinding oncoming drivers, which apparently white light people think is blinding. I've seen my headlights both in oncoming traffic and in the rearview mirror. They're not that bright. They're nowhere near as bright as the Ford and Chevy trucks with the 4 headlights, which the OEMs designed incorrectly and actually are illegal, and nobody's done anything about. They are not nearly as bright as HIDs that are adjusted incorrectly and are illegal, and nobody has done anything about. They are less bright than Chrysler's pure hemispherical reflector housings, which are also illegal and nobody has done anything about. But I'm crazy. So my lights, people still flash their high beams at me. There is one little spur that maybe people with astigmatisms get bugged by, because there's a tiny little spur that sticks up on the driver headlight only. And maybe that's what the issue is, I'm not sure. But you can clearly see the lights don't illuminate the road all that well. I've seen far, far better beam patterns on a number of other cars. So it was kind of this trip, honestly, that made me realize they weren't quite as great as they should be for being safe. Most of the places I could see well enough that it wasn't a concern. But when you get into roads where there's not a whole lot of signage, there's not a whole lot of big fences on the side out in like open range land, kind of like this stretch of road right here, where it's just 2 lanes, a small shoulder, and not really fences to keep a whole lot of wildlife or to slow down wildlife. It becomes quite concerning, actually, not being able to see much of anything more than a couple dozen feet in front of you. Luckily, though, the sun eventually came up and it became a lot easier. Part of the reason I wanted to drive at night in the beginning is because it takes a lot more energy, it takes a lot more processing, concentration, paying attention to drive at night than it does during the day. So I would rather get the night driving out of the way when I'm fully rested and awake and capable, as opposed to after being up for 24 hours already and I've still got 3 hours to go, and now it's nighttime, and are there deer, and I don't know because their eyes don't always glow if they're looking away from you, and etc., etc. You can see where I'm going with this. And I do find it kind of funny how much difference in light collection the headlights made for the front camera versus the rear camera. Granted, the rear camera is facing out 30%, and the front camera is facing out the windshield, so there's going to be a lot more light coming in through the windshield anyway. But it was very interesting to me when I went back through this footage that the rear camera was just, other than a few cars in the back, you couldn't really see. Even when the cars were there, you couldn't see anything because tint and it's dark. But as the sun comes up, we're pulling into Utah. It was near the end of Arizona and about the beginning of Utah when the sun started coming up. So you guys missed all of Arizona, which, no big loss. Arizona's not really all that interesting. At least not the roads I drove. There's a few interesting things out there. Meteor Crater used to be interesting, but now they want $65 to go look at a hole in the ground. Definitely not worth it to me. Petrified Forest is still pretty cool. It's like $5 or $6 per vehicle, and you can drive in and pull off and take a look at the old petrified trees, and that's really nifty. Been there a few times. There's also the Painted Desert and the Grand Canyon, which, funnily enough, I lived in Arizona for 15 years. Never went to the Grand Canyon, not once. Haven't been. It's a river that dug a hole in the ground. Yeah, it's kind of cool, but not enough for me to warrant the drive up there. If there was something at the Grand Canyon that I was going to go do, or near the Grand Canyon that I was going to go do, then yeah, let's shoot over there real quick. 45-minute drive, hour drive, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But every time I've gone by it, I've been going somewhere else. Vegas, or Sierra Vista, or Logan, or Texas, or Idaho, or wherever I'm going, and the drive is such that I really can't warrant stopping at the Grand Canyon for 2 to 3 hours to take some pictures, because if I'm there, I'm taking pictures, obviously. I'm not just going to the Grand Canyon just to look at it for 5 minutes. You gotta go and you gotta take some pics. What else do you do? But yeah, I've never been to the Grand Canyon. I've been to Meteor Crater back in the day before it was $65 a person. Not even for a party. It's $65 a person to go and look at an unweathered meteor crater in the middle of the desert. Like, that kind of bugs me. It's private property. It's owned by a person or a family or some such thing, and they can do whatever they want with it, I suppose. But it seems to me as though they built this giant visitor center and now they have to pay for it, and that's what you're paying for, where previously it was just a little visitor center and they had a few little trinkets you could buy, and they paid one person to be the visitor center, and they paid for some fences so you didn't fall down in the hole in the ground, and that was perfectly sufficient. I don't know. It's cool, but I wouldn't call it $65 cool. But that's just me rambling, I suppose. Again, these images, a number of these vehicles that we've seen behind and in front have been absolutely too close. And of course, the way the lenses are set up on these, they're webcams. They're webcams meant to be placed on a monitor or on your desk and point at your face, and you're meant to fill the whole frame with your face. So they're not really made for road trip images, footage, whatever. So if I continue to use the webcams for road trips, which I do plan on, I like road trips. Anytime I go on a road trip, I would love to just do this. Just film the trip. And anybody that wants to watch 45 minutes of somebody driving down the road, they're more than welcome to. You'll notice right here that it looks like I'm drunk or something, and I can't stay in my own lane. That is due to the tires that are on the vehicle. They're wide tires compared to what was on the vehicle to begin with. The factory size, I think, was 185, 75, 14 or 13s. And that's a pretty narrow tire. The ones that are on there now are 205 45s. And they're pretty wide by comparison. And wider tires track more easily. What that means is, when you're driving down the road, if you have any kind of imperfection in the road, like ruts or gouges or anything like that, a narrower tire will fit in the gouge more often and more regularly than a wider tire will. The wider tire, you'll hit the edge of the gouge or the rut or whatever it is, and it will push the tire around. So a lot of this, what appears to be not me staying in my lane, was tracking, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it until this trip where I was filming, and I was thinking of filming, and I was thinking, oh, let's show people, parts of the lane you drive in for this. I was going to do this whole spiel about when you're passing vehicles, stay on the outside of the lane. If there's nobody around, stay in the middle of the lane or the inside of the lane for safety purposes, etc., etc. I was going to do the whole thing, and then I thought to myself, well, it's going to be time-lapsed, and it's already going to be probably an hour and a half video. There's no point in me dragging it on like that. I can turn that into its own video at some point. So, sped up, I appear to be unable to control my vehicle. But most of it's tracking. Here in sort of the later stages of the video, some of it was me being tired. Some of it was, you take a drink, or you're looking in the mirrors, or you're switching positions in the seat. things of that nature, and all of those things, your arms are going to move a little bit, your hands are going to move a little bit, etc., etc., and you're not going to stay directly center of your lane. That was the last fuel stop, which obviously it said in the little card there. That was the last fuel stop before Logan. I'm still driving on the remnants of that tank. Still got just about half a tank left, actually, after that. So that's good. And I did end up taking the interstate from, where was it? It was 89 that turned on to 84, I think. And then 84 turns on to 15. And then at some point in Arizona, it was nighttime, and there wasn't really much point in mentioning it until now when I was mentioning it already. I took 40, so I drove the interstate for 100 miles total, I guess, out of 1,000, so 10% interstate travel, which I figure probably isn't too bad. A lot of people will take the interstates exclusively. Some people will follow GPS blindly. I plugged in this route on GPS and told it no highways, which is no interstates. Google just simply doesn't use the correct nomenclature. So I told it no interstates, and it tried to take me down some of the dumbest roads. Roads that I know for a fact are 25 for 40 miles. And it was trying to add, so the total trip time, I mentioned it before, was 18 hours and 45 minutes. If I had taken the road that Google had suggested blindly, by not taking any interstates, this trip would have taken me 22 hours. Which is why reading a map is still a useful skill. If you can't read a map, sit down with a map and learn. It's blindly following Google is probably one of the worst driving decisions you could make outside of intentionally ramming people. It's so bad. And then you have this little switch that says, oh, make the trip for fuel economy, blah, 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 blah. That's enabled. 22 hours. That was enabled. I think 22 hours of engine running is probably worse for fuel economy and for emissions than 18 3/4 hours would be. Right? Regardless of distance driven, it's probably more fuel overall. I think that the total trip time for that one too was 1,100 miles instead of the 1,040 that this trip ended up being. So it wasn't even that many more miles for 3 more hours of travel time. And Google doesn't account for fuel stops, which is silly. I swear. Yeah, MapQuest. I need a printer first, but I need to get MapQuest, because MapQuest did so much better than Google has ever done. MapQuest before Google even. Before Google Maps. MapQuest was so far ahead of the curve, it wasn't even funny. The only problem I think I ever had with MapQuest was sometimes it didn't have road updates. But I would suspect that today, MapQuest's roads are probably updated off of Google's API, which would mean they have all the construction and speed trap and speed limit data from Google, but their map algorithm is probably still infinitely better. Yeah, coming down the mountain before I hit this uphill, some stuff vibrated loose. The whole trip it was fine. It vibrated loose and bonked me in the head. And it was kind of like half, I was half holding it to try to hold it in place until I could find, it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles until I could find one of those little pull-offs to pull off and shift it back into place. It was sort of funny, sort of annoying, and sort of funny again. And this is the bit where I was looking at the map every, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, because the road through, I don't remember what this was. Was this Provo? I don't even remember. The map through here was confusing on the map, but then I'd look at the signs, and so Utah has this problem, this very, very severe problem, where Utah does not know how to signage. They put intersection signs at the intersection, not before them. I think in the entirety of the state of Utah, there are 3 speed limit signs. The whole state of Utah only contains 3 speed limit signs. So on any given road, especially if you've just turned onto the road, for however many hundreds of miles, you have no idea what the speed limit on the road is, which explains some things about the way people drive in this state. Not everything, but some things. You can also see everybody is like flying by me, which, granted, time lapse, it looks faster, but everybody was doing at least 5 mile an hour more than I was, and I was 1 or 2 mile an hour over the speed limit on the downhills and the speed limit up hills. So there's no good cause for that. If you intentionally exceed the speed limit, you are part of the problem. If you race the GPS, you are part of the problem. Because that is a problem. Speed limits exist for a reason. If you don't like them, you are more than welcome to petition your local governments to have them changed. You can do that. That is a thing that exists. But until you make it a point to go and make a change, perhaps obey the law, maybe. Because those of us who you are endangering do not appreciate it. And you see that car right there that looked like it was slowing down as it was pulling in front of me when it was entering a highway? That's because it was. Don't ask me why. 2 cars entering the highway. The first one accelerates and gets on the highway. It is law in almost every state that when entering a roadway via an on-ramp from a stop sign, you A, yield the right-of-way, and B, accelerate to a speed that matches that on the road you are entering, that matches the traffic. That is the order in which you process that information. You enter the road at speed, and you put yourself somewhere in a hole. If you don't do those things, you have entered the roadway incorrectly. Now, I know that California has that completely backwards, where on-ramps have the right-of-way, which is just, don't even get me started on how dumb that is. But this guy, he was accelerating. He was getting onto the road. And as soon as I watched him, he looked in his mirror and he slammed on his brakes. He was in front of me. There was no cause for him to hit his brakes. There was no cause for him to slow down. There was a car beside me, so I couldn't get over. What the heck do you expect me to do, guy? What? Go! You're entering a road that's 65 and you're trying to do it at 35. No, that's not how that's done. You nincompoop. And as we near the end of our journey, that's probably enough ranting from me. You guys have probably just skipped around to the end anyway to see if I made it alive, which I'm posting this video, obviously I made it alive. That's just a dumb statement to make anyway, but it's funny and it makes me chortle. Har 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 har. So as we reach the end of our journey. If you came and you made it this far, all the way through, I'd like to thank you, friend. And I would hope that if this video made you laugh, you'd like it, subscribe it, crank it, and rip it, and hopefully we will see you in the next one. You folks have a good day.